love the Panthers' grit. I love their goaltending. I love that they're on the cusp of winning the Stanley Cup as soon as tonight. Morning to you. Good Tuesday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports, and this is Daily Shot of Penguins. It comes your way bright and early every weekday. If you're into football and or baseball, I also offer daily shots of Steelers and Pirates in the same place that you found this. Before I get going today, I want to thank everybody for the kind wishes that were sent this way on the vacation that I took. The first one, really, that I've taken since starting these daily shots right around peak COVID time a few years back. It was a little weird, I'm not going to lie, not doing them. It was a little weird being on the wrong side of the planet while the Stanley Cup final was going on. I still found my own little ways to watch, at least parts of it. And for as much praise as I've lavished on these Panthers really for weeks now, going back to the earliest rounds of the playoffs and even into the regular season, I felt like this was going to be the team to beat in the Eastern Conference. When I watch these playoffs through the prism of a Pittsburgher, of someone who covers the Penguins, and I'm sure you guys will do a lot of the same stuff. When you're watching these games, you'll think, boy, the Penguins could do that, or they could use that guy. Or in the case of Evan Rodriguez, they really shouldn't have let go of that guy. And then you try to apply it to what reality is, because you know that there's no such thing as a Mike Sullivan team that's ever going to be as undisciplined as the Panthers are, and by the way, continue to be and were again in Game 4. They will just take their penalties and presume that they'll kill them off. You know and I know that it never happened in Pittsburgh under Sullivan. So between that and looking at, Sergei Bobrovsky versus Tristan Jarry, it's probably a waste of everybody's time to, sit here and advocate that the Penguins ought to be like the Panthers. Well, they're not going to be. They're not going to have that grit, and they're not going to have that goaltending. You know what I wonder, though? I wonder if they would at least be able to begin moving toward a defensive group like what Florida has. Now, I've said before, and I believe this, that the Panthers have the best top four in the league, but if you look at all 6 of their guys, if you look at their main people, Gustav Forsling's turned into a guy that ought to be getting discussed for Norris Trophy. Aaron Ekblad, Mikko Mikkola, Brandon Montour, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, who for a while there in Phoenix was a star, and Dmitry Kulikov, who was in Pittsburgh for a cup of coffee. That's a hell of a group. That's a hell of a half dozen to be sending out there shift after shift after shift and not sweating who's doing what or who's responsible for what. You know they all can do a little bit of everything. This episode is brought to you by Bet Online, your number one source for all your summer sports needs this season, from Major League Baseball, golf, NHL, NBA playoffs. Get the latest odds and lines, including all team matchups, player props, odds on just about everything that's out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Bet Online, where the game starts. I said it in the first round, said it in the second round, said it in the third round. I'm going to repeat it now during the final. The Florida defense has controlled these playoffs more than any other facet of any other hockey team, but also more than any other facet of the Panthers themselves. Do the Penguins have that? No. Do the Penguins have pedigree? Of course they do. They have Chris Letang and Erik Karlsson. Do they have a player who's as high quality and consistent as a Forsling? No, but they have Marcus Pettersson. And unfortunately, I can't carry the dialogue realistically a whole lot further than that. I just can't. I want to think all of the good things about Jack St. Ivany, and I'll continue to do that in a fair context, but I'm not about to anoint him into some kind of category with these other Florida players that I mentioned. Can David Quinn come in and take care of Ryan Graves. Maybe he's done it with others, but you know what? Todd Reardon did it with others and couldn't with Graves. And by the way, remember, everybody who listens to this show on a regular basis, that it was the day before Reardon was fired that I pointed out to you guys that I didn't think he'd lose his job over the power play. I thought he'd lose his job over not having gotten more out of Graves. Well, look who replaced Reardon. Quinn's not some power play wizard either. Quinn is being brought in to do what Reardon couldn't. Maybe. But let's say Graves works out. Let's say Graves at least becomes decent. He doesn't become this horrific personified contract that he is right now. Who's rounding out your six? Are you going to throw in a P.O. Joseph because he had a decent finish to his season? I mean, I guess you could. Are you going to get excited about it? No. You going to throw in Ryan Shea? I'm not. I saw some defensive lapses there. And if you're not producing offense on any kind of regular basis, I don't want to see your defensive lapses. Can somebody be brought in? Could Kyle Dubas kind of go away from what the conventional wisdom is about the Penguins' shortcomings, and instead of addressing the bottom six or, even elements of the top six, could he say, you know what? I'm just going to take the Florida approach. I want 6 terrific players back there. Or at least 5.5 if you can get Graves to a 0.5. If I do that, we become a more solid, more dependable 5-on-5 team, one that doesn't blow leads, one that gets the puck to Sidney Crosby faster and more accurately, one that kills penalties more effectively, one that might be, a little bit tougher depending on the type of player that you were to add. I'm just throwing it out there. All I ever hear from anybody who follows this team is, add to somewhere in the top 6, add a winger, add a big name, big scorer. Or on the bottom 6, get a big old tough guy. I think this is more plausible. We know from watching these playoffs, at least with the Florida Panthers, that it works. When we come back, J1Q. Today's J1Q comes from Scott, who says, DK, I have no trust in Kyle Dubas to fix the mess that is the Penguins. He inherited a lot of bad stuff and then made it even worse with many of the moves he made last offseason. You can't rebuild and try to keep old players happy at the same time. It won't work. Scott, I have a hard time with really cast in concrete labels. I don't believe that it's an either or between rebuilding and continuing to compete with Sid. I don't believe that you have to go all out, draconian, sell off every player for a zillion draft picks and then wait 5-6 years and suck completely for a half decade before those players are, 21, 22 years old. That's not reality in the salary cap based NHL. It was. I don't know how old you are, Scott, or how long you've been following the game, but I do know that pre-cap, that was the only route that you had. If you couldn't win consistently, or being real here, you couldn't afford to keep up with the teams that were way outspending everybody else, Rangers, Red Wings, Canadiens, and so forth, then you had to blow it up. You had to really blow it up. That's just not true anymore. One thing that gets lost, I think, among hockey fans in general, when you hear the term salary cap, you always think of the upper end, right? It's just, cap. It's at the top. I think it's a whole lot like the way people misuse global warming when climate change is actually a better term for it. Because what climate change is it just causes a lot of different goofy things to happen to the weather. It's not just the overall general warming of the planet. Similarly, the cap also comes with a floor. It's a pretty tight range. It's about $20 million apart. Teams can't spend below that range. They're not allowed. They're not even allowed to do this thing that I think some people fear that the Penguins need to do. It would never be like Sid and the Kids or something, where Sid's like grandpa and there's a bunch of Braden Yeagers flying all around him and he's just getting them ready to be part of the next great generation of Pittsburgh hockey. That's not it. They couldn't do that quite literally if they wanted to. Listen, I've been critical of Dubas. There's a lot of people who listen to this program who feel I've been excessively and unfairly critical of Dubas. And I could take that. That's fine. That's part of the process here. But one thing that I'm positive that I support with what Dubas is doing, if not necessarily what he's done, because I also happen to share your view that he really butchered some stuff last offseason, is that he's holding on to the draft picks now. I'll bet you couldn't get Yeager off of him with a crowbar. I'll bet I don't want to say nothing. I'll bet there's next to nothing you could offer him for his top prospect, or for that matter, his first round pick for 2025 and beyond. And that's good. That's as it should be. That needs to be made clear to everybody, not just in the organization, but also outside the organization and the public. And there needs to be, I feel like, some sort of almost educational process that occurs here between now and the formal start of the coming NHL season, where Dubas, and he's the only one who's going to be able to pull this off, just lays it all out there. Listen, it's great. We have Sid here. We're going to sign him to an extension. He's going to be a Penguin for life. We're going to continue to do everything within our means to make sure that Sid is surrounded by a quality, potentially even a contending type of roster. But we're going to do that within this context. We aren't giving up our first round pick. We aren't giving up Yeager. We aren't giving up Owen Pickering. We aren't giving up Yoel Blomqvist. We aren't giving up the guys we just got in the Jake Gensel trade. We're probably not giving up young players. And we're not giving up pieces of our future. That said, we still have the weaponry here, chiefly the salary cap and the money to spend up to that cap to make sure that the team is still competitive and respectable with Sid. And by spending to the cap, we aren't doing anything at all to negatively impact our future. That message, I think it really needs to get out there, I appreciate the question. I appreciate everybody listening to Daily Shot of Penguins. Again, thanks to everybody for the wishes over the vacation. We're going to have another one of these tomorrow.